That day seemed ordinary. I was at home, working, when the internet started dropping over and over again. I called the provider, and after several minutes on hold, they said they'd send a technician later that afternoon. I felt relieved. Without a connection, my work came to a halt. Around 4 o'clock, the intercom rang. It was him. Calm voice, polite tone, saying he was from the company and needed to check the router. I opened the door, and the moment he stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the lingering gaze, or maybe his face was just too expressionless. He carried a large backpack with several compartments and wore the company uniform. Everything seemed normal, yet something about the way he moved felt off. Slow, methodical, eyes scanning every detail of the house. He started working on the cables in the living room. The silence was heavy. He asked questions that made me uncomfortable. If I lived alone, how much time I spent at home, and at what hours I used the internet most. Questions that, from another technician, might have sounded routine, but from him, they felt like a test. I answered as little as possible, a knot tightening in my stomach. Time dragged on, and he never seemed to finish. The daylight was fading through the window when I asked if he was almost done. He gave a half smile without looking at me and said he needed to check the bedroom too. I refused immediately, trying to sound casual. There's no router there. Everything's here in the living room. He stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded slightly like he understood but didn't agree. I held my phone discreetly, sent a message to a friend, and asked her to stay on the line with me. I pretended to talk to my boyfriend, saying loudly that I had plans and needed to leave soon. He didn't respond. He kept fiddling with the wires, texting on his phone. A few minutes later, he packed up his tools and said the issue was almost fixed, but he needed a specific part, one he didn't have with him. He'd return the next day. I was tense, but I just nodded, wanting him gone. As soon as he left, I locked every door. When I checked the network, the signal was worse. Before it flickered, now it was completely gone. I waited for hours, watched some TV, had dinner, and must have dozed off on the couch. I woke up to the sound of the intercom ringing again. Still half asleep, I stumbled to answer, and my heart skipped. It was the technician again. I didn't remember scheduling a time. Maybe I'd forgotten in all the stress from the day before. It was him, same calm voice, saying he'd found the missing part and needed to replace it. I hesitated. Something inside me screamed not to open the door, but necessity won. I needed the internet working to get back to my job, so I let him in, promising myself it would be quick. But as the door opened, I realized he wasn't alone. Another man stood behind him. Same company uniform, but no visible ID badge. The atmosphere shifted. I decided to leave the living room door wide open. I sat close to the exit, pretending to be relaxed. He noticed. His eyes flicked to the open door, then to his companion, and he gave a short, mocking smile. That simple gesture hit me like a punch. It was the smile of someone who knew I was afraid. He asked if I had just woken up, speaking as if we were old friends. I hated his tone. I hadn't given him any reason to talk to me like that, but fear kept me quiet. Fear that saying something might trigger something worse. They spoke in low voices, broken sentences filled with long pauses. The main technician, the one from before, stepped closer. "Working alone must be tough," he said in that slow, strange tone. "Especially when there's no one around to help if something breaks." I forced a nervous smile and said my boyfriend was often around. It came out automatically, pure self-protection. He raised an eyebrow, looked around, and then at me again. In that instant, I knew he saw through the lie. Only one glass, one plate, one pair of shoes, clothes on a chair, all belonging to a single person living alone. I pretended to text someone, my heart pounding, trying to convince myself there was no reason to be afraid, that nothing would happen, that they wouldn't dare do anything stupid. Pulling me out of my thoughts, while I could feel my pulse in my neck, he stepped even closer. With that same half-smile, he said softly, "But if he's like the internet, maybe he'll fail you when you need him most." His words sounded casual, but something dark lingered behind them. I didn't even process the weight of what he'd said until later. Every line he spoke had a double meaning. I froze. The second man near the door let out a short, dry laugh. That was enough. I stood up and said, "Look, I really need to go. I've got something now. Thanks for coming, but you don't need to finish. I'll let the company know, okay?" The technician stared at me, unblinking. The silence stretched so long I almost screamed. Then he finally said quietly, "Relax. We're almost done. It'll just take a second. I promise it'll work better than before." His tone, the words he chose, the way he said, "work better." Everything felt wrong. All I could think about was leaving. I pretended to take a call, grabbed my phone, and said loudly, "Babe, I'm heading out now. They're just leaving, okay?" That did it. He froze for a moment, then slowly packed his tools and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned back and whispered, "If the signal drops again, call me. I'll come back." The door closed. I stood there, frozen, listening to his voice echoing in my head, blending with the sound of my heartbeat. Fear kept me from calling the company to complain. He already knew where I lived, my schedule, that I worked from home. It was a mix of anger and helplessness, trapped, praying he'd forget I ever existed. That day I just wanted to go home. It had been a long afternoon, full of meetings, and all I wanted was silence. I ordered a ride through the app, sat in the back seat, and leaned my head against the window. The driver seemed friendly, a bit talkative, but nothing out of the ordinary. He asked if the address was correct, confirmed the destination, and we set off. At first, the conversation was light. We talked about traffic, the heat, those small, meaningless things that fill the silence. He seemed polite, but there was something in his voice. A subtle insistence, a way of stretching topics that should have already ended. He asked if I liked perfumes. I answered quickly, without thinking much, "Yeah, I do." He smiled as if that was exactly what he'd wanted to hear. Said he was passionate about fragrances, that he collected them, and that there was one in particular he was thinking of buying for his wife. I thought it was just casual talk, but soon I felt uneasy. He said that perfume was unique, and that he really wanted me to smell it and give my opinion. That's when something inside me tensed. I tried to brush it off. I'm terrible at judging perfumes." He laughed and replied, "But yours is nice. I can tell you've got good taste." I went silent. The compliment felt out of place. Then he reached into the dashboard and pulled out a small bottle. It wasn't a brand I recognized, just a clear, generic glass bottle with a golden cap. "Here, smell this one," he insisted. "It's soft, floral. I think you'll like it. I'm thinking of giving it to my wife, but I wanted to know what a woman with good taste thinks." My stomach dropped. Right then, I remembered the recent reports of women being drugged after smelling perfumes offered by strangers. I reacted quickly and said, "I can't. I'm allergic. Perfume makes my throat swell." My voice trembled, but I kept it steady. He frowned, looked at me through the rearview mirror, and gave a short laugh. That's a shame, but it's really mild. Not even real perfume. More like an essence." "Even so," I repeated. "I'd rather not." The air grew thick. He insisted again, saying it was natural, irresistible, or something like that. I refused, sharper this time. I could hear the dry clicking of his phone keyboard, fast typing every time the car stopped at a light. We drove in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "You know what it is. Nowadays people don't value scent anymore. Smell tells you everything about a person." My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and called my husband. I turned on the speaker and spoke loudly on purpose, just to fill the space and break the tension. "Hey, love. I'm almost there, okay? Yeah, I'm in the car. Oh, you're at the market, right? I can see it from here." I made sure to meet the driver's eyes in the mirror. He noticed. The clicking on his phone grew faster, harsher. He seemed to be texting someone, his jaw tight. The car was going too fast for that quiet street. I tried to breathe deeply. "Honey," I continued a little louder. "Stay there at the market. I'm almost there. I'll get out right in front." Then I pointed ahead and told the driver to stop near the market. He glanced at me in the mirror and said dryly, "I can't stop before the drop-off point. That causes problems for me on the platform." The way he said "problems for me" sounded more like a warning than an excuse. My stomach twisted. I tried to stay calm. "But it's right there, see? Just by the market, turn left." He ignored me. The silence stretched, heavy and menacing. The sound of the engine felt louder, the air thicker, the car smaller. I thought about opening the window, but the button didn't work. Panic began to rise, cold, heavy. I gripped my phone tightly and said to my husband, loud enough for the driver to hear. He said he's taking me to the final stop. He's going there now. I shared my trip. Check it, okay? I repeated it deliberately, locking eyes with the driver. That's when his face hardened. His hands gripped the wheel, and his foot pressed down on the accelerator. The car sped up, too fast. I held my breath, my body frozen. The tension was so thick it felt like noise. For a few seconds, I thought he would ignore me completely and drive straight to the destination. But then he swerved sharply and stopped a few meters from the market. "Here's fine, right?" he said with a strange, restrained smile. All I could do was nod, grab the handle, and get out. My legs were shaking. The wind hit my face as the sound of the car speeding away echoed behind me. I stood there, staring at the market lights reflected in the glass, trying to process what had just happened. I took a shaky breath, noted down his license plate, and saved it on my phone. When I got home, I broke down crying, terrified and shaken. I told my husband everything. I filed a report through the app and went straight to the police station to make an official complaint.